Greetings, and welcome back to Krill Inspires, the YouTube channel. I am your host, Krill, the author of the podcast guidebook entitled Creating a Successful Interview Podcast, a how-to guide. I know I've been away from the channel for a little bit. I've been a bit busy, but I'm really excited to get back in the groove and share some insight on things you can do to help develop a successful interview podcast. So I want to jump right into it. I want to talk about guide 7 in my book, which is available right now on Amazon. The book is available as an ebook on Amazon.com. And that guide is avoiding filler responses. So let's talk about what filler responses are. Filler responses are short responses the interviewer gives to indicate that they understand what the guest is saying. Let's say you ask a question to your guest, and while your guest is answering the question, you respond with an affirming word or sound like right, or or yes, or ah. Those words that you say or those sounds that you say to let your guest know that you understand what they're saying or you're aware and present with what they're saying. These are filler responses. It is one of the easiest mistakes we make when it comes to interviewing guests, right? Because we're so naturally engulfed in the interview that we don't even think about making these responses while our guest is speaking. But the problem with this is that when you listen back to the interview, you'll see how distracting too many filler responses can sound in an interview. And what it does is it takes the shine away from your guests. One of the things that's most important when it comes to conducting interviews is for the podcaster to realize that they are not the center of attention. The audience is listening for the guests, right? So you want to eliminate as much talking as possible. You want to do your talking mainly while you're asking your questions, right? Or you want to do as less interrupting of the guest's responses as possible. And sometimes filler responses can come across sort of an interruption of the guest speaking, right? Now, it's not going to come across like that if you do it occasionally, okay? So I'm not saying that you have to avoid them completely, but you want to lessen your filler responses because it just makes for a more smoother experience on the listener's part when they hear the full interview. Okay, so there are 3 things that you want to do to avoid filler responses. The first one is to be mindful of any sounds you make while your guest is speaking. Okay, that's really important because once you go into the interview with that mindset, it will really prepare you to not use those responses while your guest is responding. Okay, so keep that in mind, right? Be aware, be cognizant as you enter the interview that I'm going to not interrupt my guests, or I'm going to be as quiet as possible when they're speaking. All right. The next one is to practice silence after you have asked your question. This one is also very important, and it's a good strategy to get you to lessen your filler responses. So while your guest is speaking, what should be on your mind is this is the time for me to be silent. What the silence allows you to do is to hone in more on what they're saying so that now you can really say that you walk away understanding their response, and that also gives you an opportunity to follow up with a great question, which I talked about in one of my previous videos. And that silence just gives that guest the room to really just express themselves without interruption. The other thing is to use non-verbal communication. This is another really cool strategy you can use. So obviously it makes a lot more sense if you're doing a video interview or even a virtual video interview where the guest can see you. Being silent but using gestures, like non-verbal gestures like shaking your head or putting your thumb up, is another way to allow your guests to have that free, exclusive time while they're responding, and you not have to interrupt with any filler responses. Okay, so keep those three things in mind. First, be mindful of any sounds you make while your guest is speaking. 2, practice silence after you've asked your question. And 3, use nonverbal communication. Now, if you're doing an audio podcast, this might be a time where you might want to pick and choose when you use your filler responses. But the good thing is, if you are mostly being silent, you'll be more careful of when to use your filler responses, right? So I'm not saying, like I said earlier, to eliminate the filler responses completely, but there is a human personable element to bringing in the filler responses. But when you do it with a sense of mindfulness or a sense of awareness, then you will know when to use it, and chances are you'll use it less frequently. All right, so this was a short video today. I didn't want to spend too much time because this is a very straightforward topic in the book, but I hope that you learned something valuable from this particular guide. And if you're someone who feels like you can use a little bit more help, a little bit more one-on-one help with developing your interview podcast and developing certain strengths, you could definitely reach out to me. I am doing consultations, and there's a link in the description of the video where you can book a consultation with me, and I can really get a chance to know, what your goals are and what some of your struggles are with your podcasting journey, and I can speak to you on the steps that you can take to achieve your podcasting success directly. All right, so feel free to reach out at the link in the description of the video, and remember to like and subscribe the video if you haven't done so yet. All right, thank you so much, and I will catch y'all on the next video. Y'all have a good one. Take it easy.